Hi, welcome to Dee's Kitchen Lab, and I'm going to tell you why you're going to want to make this kind of baklava, which is the Turkish style of baklava, which I had at the library made by my friend Mike B. And then we went to Turkey and had it again and again there, and it was great. Why I prefer this one to the Greek style baklava is that it tastes like nuts and crunchy pastry, and it's so pure and perfect tasting. On the other hand, the Greek style baklava often has cinnamon in it. It has can have other spices, cloves, honey, lemon peel, orange peel, and the sugar syrup. And I find it sometimes a little bit too sweet for my taste. It's not as appealing to me as the simple, pure, straightforward flavors of the Turkish baklava. And it makes it super easy to make as well. And I'll tell you how to do that next. All right, let's get started with making our baklava. Sugar, water, butter, phyllo dough, pistachios. That's it, no other flavoring. Actually, you have to start prepping this recipe the day before because your phyllo dough is usually frozen. It's best to thaw them out in the refrigerator overnight. And then whenever you're ready to use the recipe, leave this out for, half an hour or so just to warm to room temperature. We're going to start with this sugar syrup first. I've got 3/4 of a cup of water and 1.5 cups of sugar. And we're gonna let that come to a boil and then turn it off. And that's all there is to it. The next thing we wanna do is melt our butter. So a lot of recipes call for clarifying the butter, but when I went to the Phoenician grocery store in North Brunswick, they told me there that if you use good butter, you do not have to clarify it. So we've got 3 cups of pistachios, which are my favorites, and they're typical for the Turkish style of baklava. We're gonna grind them in the food processor. We're gonna pulse these so they don't get too finely ground. Probably about 10 or 12 pulses. So this is just about perfect. We're going to make 2 layers of nuts in our pastry. So I'm just going to divide them up right now. That's even enough. I'll put those to the side. All right, now we're ready to start with layering the phyllo, the fun part. So I'm going to put my sugar syrup to the side and bring over my butter. And you can either put this directly into your pan or you can line it with parchment paper. I like lining it with parchment because then when you cut through the layers, you're not gonna make marks on your pan, especially if it's a non-stick pan. You don't want to ruin the non-stick surface. So we're going to take a little of this butter, put the parchment paper on there just so it doesn't move. Now we've got our lovely phyllo dough, and you could make this from scratch. A project I would like to try sometime in the future. But right now we're just gonna go with this. I used the Kantos brand phyllo dough from the Phoenician Lebanese market, but you can use the Athens brand instead. You'll just have to use both rolls. Either way, it's 1 pound. We're gonna divide that in half, and then we've got a little bit of overhang here. So I'm just gonna trim that off so we can layer more easily. And we're gonna use this little bit of leftovers. We're not gonna throw it away. We'll just put that in between the layers. Now we wanna cut this in half. So we want to create 1/3 of the phyllo dough buttered layers, then nuts, another 1/3, nuts, and the final 1/3 of the phyllo dough. So I'm going to just stack these on top of each other so they stay so they don't dry out. You can cover this with a plastic wrap, cover it with a damp kitchen towel, and that's basically just to keep the plastic in contact with the phyllo dough. So you would just dampen a tea towel and put that on top, and then take out your layers from there. All right, we're gonna start our layering. We are going to do 2 layers. This is number 4 phyllo in this Contos brand, which I understand is the best. This is number 4, which is the thinnest. It also comes in 7 and 10. For if you're doing like spanakopita, you want it a little thicker. All right, so we've got 2 down. We're gonna take a scant tablespoonful of butter. And if it tears like it did there, no problem, because you're gonna do so many layers. It's all going to get covered up. Just continue with that. So now we've got 2 more. I'm not even gonna measure. I'm just going to drip that on there and lightly brush this. So I can tell you right now the difference between using the Athens phyllo and this phyllo. This is more moist and it just feels nicer. That's 4, now we've got 6. Continue layering, buttering after every 2 leaves until you've used up 1/3 of the phyllo dough leaves. I'm going to just sprinkle my pistachios right in there. Okay, so we're just going to smooth these in an even layer. You don't have to press down. Now we're gonna go on to the layering. So 2 layers. This one we have to be a little bit more careful because they move around, with nuts being the layer in between. Continue layering the next 1/3 of phyllo leaves. Add the rest of the pistachios and smooth out. And continue with the layering, putting a tablespoon of butter in between every 2 sheets of phyllo. Okay, so now we're going to use this leftover scraps, and we're just going to sort of randomly place them. We're just going to drizzle the butter, and then we're back to layering, 2 at a time. 13. This is my top layer, just like that. All right, so now we're going to, this is one from the other day. I like the smaller pieces of baklava, so about 1 1/4 inches at the most across. So I'm going to cut this whole baklava down through the middle, and serrated knife is best for this. And where you noticed I didn't butter the top so that it wouldn't get butter all over the place. I think I'm going to divide this into 3 now. That should be fine. So we're cutting with an up and down sawing motion. It's cut all the way to the bottom, and you don't have to worry about your pan because you've got that parchment paper on there, and my watch keeps getting stuck onto the pan. So I'm just going to give that just a little guideline like that. So from the corner, and then I'm going to continue. Okay, so there it is. You can cut any pattern that you like. If you do diagonal and diagonal, diagonal and diagonal, you get more squares. So that's why you want one that's straight and the other one diagonal. So now we've got all the rest of our butter. We're gonna pour all the rest of that butter on top. You have your oven preheating to 350, and you want that set on the second to the bottom rack, so the lower third of your oven. We're going to sprinkle a little water on the top to create a little steam. And I'm just gonna sprinkle that on top. And that's all there is to it. And now this is going in the oven. I'm gonna go in for 20 to 30 minutes. I'm gonna check it after 20. It's a little bit light. I like it a little bit darker. Oops. So we're gonna let that go another 5 minutes. All right, let's see what's up. All right, I'm just going to lift up and see if that's brown enough. I really like it. I really like it quite brown. I'm gonna do an extra 2 minutes. I'm really excited. This looks awesome. So we've got our hot pastry and we've got our lukewarm sugar syrup, and we're going to pour this right over. And I'm gonna pour this right into the cut lines. Do you hear that sizzle? And it's just going to soak in, getting the syrup in all of the edges between the pan and the pastry. And then we're going to do the final, brush that on the top of the pastry. I want it to stay flaky on top, but I also want a little bit of the sugar on top as well. I'm gonna let that sit for about 4 hours, maybe a little bit less, but overnight is good. And what they say is that 48 hours after baking, it tastes the best. One of the great things about this pastry, beside the fact that it makes so many pieces, and one shot and you've got pastry for 20 people, and I would say 2 pieces is a serving. So in one shot, you've got a very impressive looking pastry. And the other thing is that you can store this for up to a month, covered at room temperature, covered with a tea towel. When we were in Istanbul, we saw shops with stacks and stacks of baklava of all shapes and sizes. And there was no way they could have made that fresh every day. So we know that it was sitting out for a while. I would say 2 weeks would probably be a good amount of time, but you could store it for longer if it lasts that long. Here's our baklava. It's been cooling for a couple hours, and we're going to just take this out and serve it with a little ice cream. If we were in Turkey, it would be the kind that had mastic in it, which means it gives it a little stretchiness. It's, oh boy, stretchy ice cream, but we just have Ben & Jerry's for today. All right, so little ice cream, little baklava. Definitely the best one yet. That is really delicious. It's the nuts. They're a little bit syrupy because they've absorbed the syrup from the sides. It's not overly sweet, and the pastry on top is flaky, and the little bit of ice cream, the creaminess just offsets the crispiness of the pastry perfectly. So this was, as my grandson would say, 10 out of 10. Hope you make this, and happy cooking. I've already eaten 4 pieces. Oops.